Hi, this is Tim Hange with Calvary Conversations, coming to you from Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. It is my honor today to have with me our guest, Norm Baker. Norm is a longtime favorite professor at Calvary University. Probably the most important thing about you, Norm, at least as far as your achievements in life, is that you have been married for 50 years as of this coming September to Mary Alice Baker. He spent 16 years in ministry with Avant, church planning, and also being an instructor at a Bible college in Mali, West Africa. He has pastored two churches for a total of 14 years in the pastorate. He's achieved a Bible certificate from a Bible and mission certificate from Frontier School of the Bible, a bachelor's degree from Calvary University, an MDiv from Trinity, and a THM from Dallas Theological Seminary. On your hobbies list, Norm, I didn't know some things about you, that you enjoy painting. Didn't know that. Studying languages. That I knew, the studying languages, golf, and time with grandkids. So, Norm, it is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks. Good to be with you too.
Well, your time in missions obviously is very interesting. Mali, Africa sounds like a fascinating place. And as I understand the progression of your journey, that's something you and your wife went to right after you completed your first Bible certificate at Frontier, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me about that. What was it like being a young missionary in West Africa?
Well, we arrived on the field very young, younger than most anybody had been up to that point for Mali. I think we did a year and a half in Switzerland studying French.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like 23 when we arrived in Mali for our first term. And in those days, it was a 4-year term with a year of furlough or home assignment. And so we were young. We had no children, newly married. We got married in September, started deputation, raising support in October. Our support came in by February. We left in May of 72 to go study French. And then in July 4th, 1973 is when we landed in Mali.
Wow. That had to be exciting. That was a very different time with, not as much technology and connection in terms of communication as we have today. So I'm sure that was quite an adventure. Tell me about learning a language to go to the field. It's interesting that they put you in a year and a half of language study before entering that field. French, I guess, primarily spoken in Mali.
Yes, French is the national language. Bambara is the trade language.
Okay. So. Okay. I noticed that you began both church planning and doing Bible college teaching. Which came first? Was it the church planning work?
Church planning came first.
Okay.
And the language part is pretty interesting. If you don't mind me doing a
Please elaborate. Yeah.
When I was in 9th grade, I took Latin because I wanted to be a doctor. That's where God changed that call. And so I was studying Latin to become a doctor. And my Latin teacher flunked me out at the semester break and said that, Norman, I'm flunking you out of Latin. You're going to send you over to the speech and drama class. And she said, by the way, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, well, I'm going to be a missionary. She goes, you have no aptitude for language.
Oh, yeah. That's now linguistics is my field, and we study language aptitude, and it isn't what a lot of people think it is. Just because you are not drawn into the study of the technical aspects of, say, the grammar of language, does not mean that you don't have an aptitude to learn how to communicate in another language. Right. Yeah.
And Latin is a dead language. Who speaks it? Nobody speaks Latin.
Right.
But everybody speaks French or Bambara or German or Italian or, so there's all kinds of live languages to study, which is what I spend my time doing. I'm working on Latin again, and I'm working on Greek and Hebrew, but,
As far as spoken languages, was French the only one that you learned?
No, we had to learn Bambara. Once we got back down to Mali, the first year and a half in Mali was studying the Bambara language. So 3 years straight of language study.
So you became fluent in two additional languages, spoken fluent in two additional languages.
Still fluent up to today.
What does that one mean?
But still fluent even to today.
Oh, sorry, you're still fluent
French
even to today.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I still speak French.
Okay. Sorry, it glitched a little bit. I thought you were giving me a sample there for a moment. So, okay, very good. Yeah. Now, tell me about the importance of that in terms of missions, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't take into account today, and even some people going to European countries where they say, well, English is a lingua franca, and I should be able to get around on that or that kind of thing. Tell me a little bit about the importance of learning a language on the field like that.
Well, there's something about speaking the mother tongue of the people you're ministering to. There's just something about it. It tells the national that you care about his culture, because as you learn the language, you're also learning the culture. So it shows him that you care enough to spend the time, the blood, sweat, and tears to learn his language or her language, and to communicate to them on their level and their language.
Right.
And one of the things that's changed a lot is that a lot of people speak English now. We went back to Mali in 2003 to visit. Everybody knows English now. Everybody speaks English. So a lot of the Malians that we spoke Bambara with for years were talking to us in English. It's like, give me a break. I want to speak Bambara. I don't want to speak English.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's what you brought out is so key, that a culture, it shapes the language, and the language also shapes the culture. There is this sort of circular relationship there.
Yeah.
But when you learn a language, you do learn the mentality of a people group. We discovered this when we were in Russia as well. Becoming fluent in Russian really gave me a great picture of the culture, and a connection with people that I wouldn't have had had I just relied on English. So
it even alerts you to the history of the culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Mali history just in studying the language and talking with people. And it all depends too on what kind of a learner you are. I'm an auditory learner, so I didn't worry about so much the grammar and the writing in class. I did all those assignments, but I spent my time on the street talking to people.
Yeah.
And if you find the right group of people that will correct you, and I found French people who do that a lot, because in Switzerland, they think they have to open up French.
Yeah.
In Switzerland, I think they have. So, and then especially in Mali, they loved it. On a number of occasions, I got into situations where being able to speak to them in their own language helped us through, especially at a police stop. And they start talking to you in French because you're a white man, but then you start talking to them in Bambara, they go, "Oh, you speak my language."
Yep.
Things change. The whole attitude, the whole atmosphere changes just that quick.
Yep. Yeah, it does make a huge difference to people, even if they do know another, lingua franca for the region, which I guess it switched from French to English in your lifetime, it sounds like. But yeah, it does really help to have that heart connection with people. There's so much that I'm sure you could tell about your time in Mali, and we're excited to know that there's a book coming out through Calvary Press, that you've authored a book that we'll be seeing soon through Calvary Press. That details primarily your journey, your ministry journey in Mali, right?
It covers our 16 years in Mali, and also covers our trip that we made out in 2003 to revisit.
Okay.
And that was kind of our closure trip. And then also covers an instance where I was here at home, and a young man came from Mali who needed surgery at KU Med Center, and I was called in to be one of the translators.
Wow.
For them.
Okay.
And so I had to sit in the room with him 8 hours a day while the doctors came in and asked questions, and I had to translate the questions to the patient, and the patient back to the doctors, etc. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That
That's another
a
book.
pretty important thing to be translating. I mean,
that's another book for another time.
Yes, wow. But you know, 25 minutes is not going to be enough, I think, to encapsulate everything. But we sure would love to hear some of the key things, the key maybe events, lessons learned from your time in Mali. What were some of the biggest? Let me start with this. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
The biggest challenge, of course, was health.
Okay.
We're living in a third world country. At that time, I don't know what it is today, but at that time, it was the fifth poorest country in the world. Every disease imaginable was there. Snakes galore, you know. So it was just God protecting us all the time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to tell people that there's only two kinds of snakes in Mali. One, they either bite you and poison you, or they eat you. One of the two.
Wow.
A lot of pythons.
Wow.
And also vipers.
So how did you, like, what did you do to take measures against snakes?
Well, for one thing, we didn't have any grass in our yards. There's no grass. There's all gravel. That keeps the snakes down. You can see them more easily. They're not hiding in the grass. We kept a cat on the yard, and sometimes ducks. Ducks and cats will put up a real big fit when a snake's around.
Gotcha.
So I had a cat save my life once by kissing when the snake was coming at me. I was under my car, working on my car, and the snake was going right towards me. And the cat intervened.
Wow. Wow, that's definitely the Lord's intervention there. That is actually something else that you and I have in common. My cat delayed me out the door by 5 minutes one time in Moscow by hiding. He was playing with something and hid it, and I had to look for it. And I was 5 minutes late out the door, which was exactly the length of time that it took between where I was and to where a bomb exploded in front of me on the metro that day. So we've both been protected by God's sovereignty through the means of a cat. So what about the ministry challenges, the people challenges?
The Mali people are very jovial, very loving people. We found them to be very patient. And their attitude was, well, he's a foreigner, he doesn't know. So we got a lot of patience, a lot of forgiveness that way. Great people to work with because they appreciate anything you do for them.
Right.
So, and I did a lot of my first year on the field after we finished the language study. I spent a lot of time doing reading classes with a literacy rate of 85% in that country. It's very important to start people on reading. All of our learning to read materials were designed through Bible stories.
Okay. Wow.
Doing the reading, so a lot of that was important. So yeah, we found the Malians to be a very enjoyable people to work with.
Has the literacy rate increased significantly since that time? Do you know?
It has some. I'm not sure what that figure would be now, but I'm sure it's above 85%.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had a 50% literacy rate at the time. 85% was illiterate. So yeah.
But it's interesting that you bring that up. That is a real lesson of missions, the humility of being a foreigner, and knowing that sometimes you will get treated differently because you're a foreigner, and sometimes it's a double standard. And it's not fair. People assume, well, he doesn't know, or he's not one of us. He doesn't, and so you do every once in a while feel, as nice as people try to be, you do sometimes feel like the outsider. And there's some real humility in just accepting that and still continuing, pushing in on relationships gently and.
But a caveat to that was the Bambara culture is very Eastern set culture. So caring for and being patient with a foreigner is tantamount in their minds. So there were times like I'd go into a hardware store and there'd be people lined up waiting in line to be helped. I'd get at the back of the line, and the guy at the front would go, "Come on up here, come up here." Go, no, I'm in line here with everybody else. I'm queuing up, and I'm here. No, come on up, and they'd insist on it, and everybody in line would go, "Yeah, you go up, let them help you, let them help you."
So in some ways, it's like an opposite bias, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, yeah. How did you find their receptiveness to the gospel, and how did you find inroads in terms of uh, making the gospel understandable, uh, especially across cultural lines?
hmm Well, of course, the first thing we did was look for cultural analogies, and we found some there. Um, by and large, the sub-Saharan Islam is not as fanatic as you find in North Africa or the Middle East.
Hmm.
So we could always gather a crowd to do open air film showings. We did 35 millimeters and we did 16 millimeter film showings. Always find a good crowd for those. Lots of people will come and listen. Very difficult for them to accept the salvation message and accept Christ, because that means turning your back on your father and your ancestry and Islam, and that's very difficult for them to do. And when someone in the family decides to become a Christian, the rest of the family starts putting pressure on them. If you're a young man that's unmarried, first thing your father says is, "Well, I'm not going to find your wife unless you leave the Christian road and come back to the Muslim road." So we had one gentleman, interesting story. We had one gentleman who lived in a village that was all Muslim. He was the only Christian in the village, and his son was not a Christian. And he had a dilemma. He said, my Muslim neighbors are telling me they're not going to give any of their daughters to my son for wife unless we go back to Islam. He said, I can't ask my Christian brothers to give me their daughters as a wife for my son because he's not a Christian. So what do I do? It was a dilemma.
Yeah. Yeah. How did that one get resolved, out of curiosity?
Well, eventually the Muslims put the pressure on him, and he wrote a letter to us and said, "Don't come visit me anymore. I'm no longer on the road. I'm going back to Islam, just so I can get a wife for my son."
I'm glad you bring this up, Norm, because one of the great pains on the mission field that you don't really think about. I think a lot of young missionaries, they go out on the field and they sort of maybe expect in their heart somewhere, even if they've tempered it in their mind, in their heart somewhere, they expect, some really, a lot of joyous conversion stories of people coming to Christ through their work, etc. But one of the things they don't necessarily expect, and I had not planned for this interview to take this direction, but I just appreciate the honesty of you sharing that story. One of the things they often don't expect is the pain of what happens when people reject, or when people first accept and then turn away. How did you deal with those kind of disappointments on the field?
Well, the first thing we often did was let them know that you may be leaving the road, but you're not leaving our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
We still love you. We still consider you a brother. And even if you decide to go back to Islam, and I told one guy, I said, "Here's the deal." I said, "You may be leaving the road, but God isn't leaving you.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're a genuine believer, God is not leaving you."
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to leave that with him. And who knows how the Lord will use that in his life, or has used that in his life. Well, we really look forward to seeing the book coming out through CU Press. I am curious. I want to move on in the time that we have to your time coming home, and then in the pastorate here. Um, it was a real adjustment for me coming back from the mission field after only 8 years. Uh, you were gone twice as long as I was on the field. How was that adjustment coming back to the United States?
Well, of course, there was the normal reverse culture shock.
Mm-hmm.
Everything moves so quickly here in America. Um, so when we came back, we came back and weren't planning on staying. So we packed everything up in Mali as if we were coming back. We got here, and a year into our furlough, we discovered that one of our kids had some learning problems, and he couldn't get special ed at the missionary boarding school in Ivory Coast. So we opted to stay home. We faced some criticism over that one.
Yeah.
But my philosophy was, if I don't give my children what they need now to prepare them for their lives ahead, then it's kind of like the cobbler's children who have no shoes.
Right. Right. We actually came back for some similar reasons, and I always tell people that our ministry in missions, our ministry to our children sits within our ministry to the kingdom of heaven. It is not in opposition to it. It sits within it. And that's great to see that you honored that ministry to your family in that way, because I'm sure that was a difficult adjustment to go through.
Because the reality is ministry is a lot of the, that's what I'm looking for. Ministry is about location.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't act like a missionary here, just because you cross the ocean isn't going to make you a missionary there. A lot of people think that, well, I'm gonna be a missionary when I get over there. No, you need to be a missionary now. You need to have that mindset now of ministering to people, reaching out, caring.
Yep.
Teaching.
Yep. Yep. That's great. And, one of my questions here is any general advice to a young person starting out who's, in their education, who's interested in missions, but I think you may have just given that, but any others, any other pieces of advice on that?
Make sure you stay adamantly involved with your church. Be involved in ministry in the church. No matter where you think you're going, how short your time is, be involved in the church.
Yep. Making the church a priority. Yeah, that's huge. That's another one of those things. If you don't do it here, you won't do it there.
Right. If you push across the water, doesn't make you a missionary.
You transitioned into a pastoral role here in the States. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'll be honest with you. It wasn't what I expected. I thought we would step into a situation where people would respect us because of what we've been and what we've done. I had one person tell me, "We're tired of hearing stories about Molly," and I had another deacon tell me, "But that's who you are. You teach out of who you are." And I said, "You're absolutely right. That's why I'm going to continue giving the stories from Molly."
Right. And sharing stories of God's faithfulness, I wonder if Paul drove people nuts with his, in Corinth, this happened. And in
illustrations.
Yep. I'm sure he shared from his storehouse of experience too.
And then back to the location thing, ministering here wasn't different than ministering in Mali. I was in a pastoral role there too, although my job in Mali in that day and age was to be a help to make the pastor successful. So I was kind of I call it indirect leadership. I was behind him, giving him ideas, letting him think that the ideas are his, and then he moving on that. So that's kind of the way we operated. Here in the States, I operated the same way. So again, it was a change of location, but not a change of philosophy of ministry.
Right. Did your cross-cultural savvy come into play when you were pastoring here in the States?
Yes, I discovered that being a missionary on the field and learning two other cultures, as we did, taught me how to read people and understand people. Yeah.
Yep.
I used to tell people that some of the best training I ever had for being a pastor was going to the mission field.
Sorry, I missed that. Some of the best
training I ever had for becoming a pastor was from the mission field.
From the mission field. Gotcha. Okay. Sorry. Glitched again a little bit on me there. So yeah. And I highly advise that even to, young people at Calvary or anywhere else, taking a year or two overseas, teaching in a Christian school or serving with some ministry where you are having to actively live in another culture, radically, if you're open to it, if you allow it to work what God wants it to work in your life, will radically increase your ability to understand other people's perspectives, to put yourself in their shoes, in their position. So yeah, that's really great. We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask about Calvary University. So what led you to teach at Calvary?
Well, when I did the year of mission residency, I was 86 and 87. I was considered a credible teacher. So Dr. Tom Monine said to me, "Why don't you go to Dallas, get your degree, and come back here and teach full time?" I said, "Sure." So that's why I went to Dallas, was to do that. But when I was finishing up at Dallas, I was told that the current president at that time, and I won't name who that was, but the current president didn't want any more Dallas graduates up there as teachers. So I took the pastorate, and lo and behold, the pastor was in Overland Park, and I was pastoring there, and one of my friends, Stan Dirksen, was the registrar at the time, and he said, "Why don't you come on over and teach?" I said, "Okay, I'd love to." So I started teaching two classes a week as adjunct. That was in 2001, and I did that until the end of 2005. And then I took a couple of years off working through a ministry change, structural change in my church, and came back in 2012 and finished in 2019. So I have 13 years altogether teaching at Calvary.
Well, I will tell you that when you retired from Calvary, the students deeply missed you. We all deeply missed you. And even at a personal level, Norm, and I say this from my heart, having come to Calvary right off the field and having a smile on my face, but sometimes being very unsettled for having to make this cultural shift, you basically honed right in on that, and you walked up to me and you're just a very open and real person, and that's, I think, one of your great. You're open, you're real, you're perceptive, and that's just that you ministered to me in that way in that time, and I'm deeply grateful for it. And I am so looking forward to reading the book that you are getting ready to share with us, because I just think. I think we're just scratching the surface of what we have to learn from, from the life from your life in ministry here. So
I appreciate your kind comments. I miss the students and I miss the faculty a lot. I told Dr. Bonine, not Dr. Bonine, so Dr. Bittner, before I left that Calvary was one of the best places I ever served.
I'm glad to hear it.
It was a family that operated like a family. I enjoyed the students. I loved the students. And the book is coming out hopefully soon. We finished the editorial meetings that we're going to lay out soon. Dr. Dodds is working with me as my editor, and he was hoping by the end of August. We don't know yet. So.
Okay. That it will be printed. Is it going to be available in print form or ebook form, or both?
I think both.
Both. Okay. And do you have any information yet about where we can get the book itself?
It'll be on Amazon.com.
Okay, it will be on Amazon.
And the title of the book is "Strangers in the Land of the Hippo."
That's cool.
Strangers. All right. The Hippo is Mali is the word for hippo in Bambara.
Wow. And the whole people group is named Mali, or the whole country is named Mali. Okay.
The hippo is their mascot. Like we have the eagle, they have the hippo. The hippo is ferociously protective of its young. So that was considered. So the country is named after the animal that fiercely protects its young.
Wonderful.
So hopefully you'll be able to find that on Amazon. Dr. Dodds is talking maybe the end of August. We don't know for sure, because once we get it all together, get the layout done, get it all together and send it to Amazon, I don't know how long it takes from that point for them to go ahead and get it out there. And because they publish on demand is what they do.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely be looking for it. Maybe we can, with CU Press, I'm sure there'll be a release on the website as well. Well, thank you so much for your time, Norm, and thank you all for listening and spending your time investing in this important conversation. Thanks again, Norm. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tim. Good being with you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Calvary Conversations, a service of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. We invite you to participate in the conversation by contacting us through the Calvary University website, calvary.edu, or by calling us at 816-322-0110. Join us again next week for another Calvary Conversation.